As you lie quietly, let these words of Scripture ease your thoughts. Feel your body relax and your heart settle into peace. Long ago, in the days when Israel was ruled by kings and queens, there lived a woman whose name would be remembered for generations. Her name was Jezebel. She was born far from Israel, in the coastal land of Sidon, the daughter of Ethbal, king of the Sidonians. From her earliest days, she was surrounded by the ordered beauty of royal life, by stone palaces warmed by the sun, by courtyards filled with quiet voices and the steady rhythm of servants moving through their tasks. Jezebel grew up knowing power as something natural and expected. She learned the ways of courts and councils, the careful language of authority, and the graceful stillness required of royalty. She was taught how a queen must carry herself, how her words could shape events, and how her presence alone could command attention. Even in her youth, there was a sense of confidence about her, a calm certainty that she belonged among rulers. When the time came, Jezebel was given in marriage to Ahab, king of Israel. Through this union, two kingdoms were joined, and Jezebel left her homeland to enter the royal house of Samaria. The journey brought her into a land with different customs, different worship, and a different understanding of God. Yet Jezebel arrived not as a quiet observer, but as a queen fully aware of her position. She entered the palace as one accustomed to influence, carrying with her the traditions and beliefs of her own people. The palace of Samaria became her home. Its halls were wide and cool, its walls adorned with carvings and fine materials brought from many lands. Jezebel moved through these spaces with ease. She wore royal garments of rich fabric and adorned herself as queens had done for centuries. Her appearance reflected dignity and control, not hurried or careless, but deliberate and composed. Each morning and evening followed familiar rituals, moments of preparation that marked her role and her identity. As queen, Jezebel held authority not only by title, but by presence. She sat beside Ahab, spoke with confidence, and involved herself in the affairs of the kingdom. The Scriptures tell us that Ahab did much evil in the sight of the Lord, and that Jezebel played a strong role in shaping the direction of his reign. Her influence was steady and persistent, woven into the daily life of the court. Decisions were made, policies enforced, and the rhythms of governance continued under her watchful eye. Jezebel's world was one of order and control. Servants listened closely for her instructions. Messengers came and went, carrying words sealed with the authority of the throne. Banquets were prepared with care, and guests were received according to rank and status. In this environment, Jezebel stood as a figure of certainty. She knew how to command loyalty, how to protect her position, and how to ensure that her will was carried out. Yet beneath the polished surface of palace life, there was also tension. Israel was a land bound by covenant to the Lord, and Jezebel did not share that devotion. She brought with her the worship of Baal and Asherah, and she supported those prophets while opposing the prophets of the Lord. This divide did not erupt in chaos at once, but existed as a quiet undercurrent, a difference of belief that shaped the atmosphere of the kingdom. Still, within the palace walls, Jezebel's life followed a steady rhythm. Days unfolded with familiar routines. The sound of footsteps echoed softly along stone corridors. Light filtered through windows and settled across woven tapestries. Time passed in measured ways, marked by seasons and ceremonies. Jezebel remained at the center of it all, composed and assured, her authority rarely questioned within her domain. She understood the importance of image and presentation. As queen, she knew that how she appeared mattered, that strength could be expressed through elegance and careful preparation. Her attention to her appearance was not hurried or anxious, but intentional. It was part of how she faced the world, how she maintained her place within the royal order. In these early years, Jezebel's life seemed firmly established. She was queen, wife to the king, and a powerful presence in Israel. The palace stood strong, the kingdom functioned, and her influence reached far beyond her private chambers. To those who observed from a distance, her position appeared secure, her authority unshaken. And so the story rests here for a moment, within the quiet stability of palace life, where power feels permanent and days pass in familiar patterns, even as unseen currents slowly move beneath the surface of history. Within the strong walls of the palace, life continued with a steady and practiced calm. Each day followed patterns shaped by tradition and authority. The rising sun brought quiet movement to the corridors as servants began their work, opening shutters, sweeping stone floors, and preparing the spaces where the royal household would soon gather. Jezebel awoke to these familiar sounds, the soft rhythm of palace life that had become as constant as breathing. Her chambers were arranged with care. Light entered gently through narrow windows, resting on polished surfaces and finely woven cloth. The air carried faint traces of oil lamps and incense. Jezebel rose without haste, fully aware of the hours before her. There was no rush in her mornings, only the measured pace of someone who expected the world to wait. She understood that her presence shaped the tone of the court, and so she began each day deliberately. Servants attended to her with quiet efficiency. Water was brought, garments laid out, jewelry selected with careful thought. Jezebel's movements were calm and controlled as she prepared herself. She did not dress merely for comfort, but for significance. Every detail mattered. The colors she wore, the fabrics that rested against her skin, and the ornaments she chose all spoke silently of her position. Among these preparations was the careful attention she gave to her face. The scriptures later note that she painted her eyes, a detail that reflected more than vanity. It was a custom she had carried from her homeland, a practice known among queens and noblewomen. The application was slow and precise, her hands steady as she outlined her eyes, enhancing their shape and depth. This ritual was not hurried. It was a moment of focus, a familiar act that grounded her in identity and control. As she looked into polished metal or stone, Jezebel saw not only her reflection, but the image of a queen who would not be overlooked. Her appearance was part of her authority, a visible expression of strength and confidence. When she was ready, she rose and stepped into the wider world of the palace, composed and assured. Beyond her chambers, the palace was alive with restrained activity. Advisers gathered, guards stood watch, and officials moved through their duties. Jezebel passed through these spaces with quiet command. Heads inclined slightly as she went by. Conversations softened in her presence. She was a constant figure in this environment, familiar yet formidable. Yet beneath the calm surface, there was tension woven into the fabric of daily life. The palace was not only a place of beauty and order, but also a center of decisions that shaped the fate of a nation. Jezebel was aware of the unrest beyond the walls, the divided hearts of the people, and the growing opposition stirred by the prophets of the Lord. These realities did not disrupt her routines, but they lingered like distant thunder, heard but not yet seen. Meals were taken in orderly settings, with attendants serving quietly and efficiently. Jezebel sat at the table with dignity, her posture composed, her voice steady when she spoke. Matters of state were discussed in measured tones. Reports were delivered, plans considered, and authority exercised through calm deliberation rather than open force. The kingdom appeared stable within these walls, even as strain quietly pressed from the outside. Throughout the day, Jezebel returned often to private spaces within the palace. There she maintained her composure, adjusting her garments, smoothing her hair, and ensuring that her appearance remained flawless. Her painted eyes remained a defining feature, a symbol of vigilance and resolve. They framed her gaze, which was observant and unyielding, always watching, always measuring. As afternoon light softened and shadows lengthened across the floors, the palace settled into a slower rhythm. Jezebel moved through her surroundings with the same confidence she carried in the morning. The calm of the palace held firm, supported by walls of stone and the authority of the throne. Yet even in these peaceful hours, the stillness was not empty. It carried the weight of unspoken conflict, of faith challenged and power defended. Jezebel continued her days within this balance, calm and controlled, her routines unbroken, her presence unchanged, as unseen forces gathered quietly beyond the gates. As time passed, the weight of Jezebel's position rested steadily upon her. Influence did not announce itself with noise or spectacle within the palace. It moved quietly, through conversations held in shaded rooms, through decisions made without haste, and through expectations that others learned to follow without question. Jezebel understood this well. She had learned that power was most effective when it appeared calm and certain. Her words carried authority long before they were spoken aloud. Servants anticipated her needs. Officials listened carefully when she spoke, knowing that her approval or disapproval shaped their future. Though the king sat upon the throne, Jezebel's presence guided the atmosphere of the court. She did not need to raise her voice to be heard. Her influence flowed through the structure of the palace like a steady current. In moments of quiet, she reflected on the reach of her role. From her chambers, she could sense the vastness of the kingdom beyond the palace walls. Cities, fields, and villages moved according to rhythms she did not see directly, yet she knew that decisions made within the palace touched every corner of the land. This awareness did not trouble her outwardly, but it remained with her as a silent companion. Leadership required constancy. Jezebel held her position day after day, not through sudden acts, but through persistence. She maintained alliances, upheld traditions she believed in, and defended the authority of the throne. Each choice added to the invisible weight she carried, a burden not spoken of openly, but understood by those who ruled. There were moments when she paused, standing near a window or seated in stillness, her gaze steady. In these times, her thoughts turned inward. She considered her past, her present authority, and the future she intended to secure. Her influence had been carefully built and carefully maintained. It was not something she believed should be surrendered easily. She was aware of opposition, though it rarely appeared before her directly. Resistance existed in whispered prayers and distant voices, in loyalty she could not fully command. Yet Jezebel did not confront these tensions with urgency. Instead, she relied on the structures she had helped reinforce. Order, she believed, was preserved through firmness and resolve. The burden of leadership was not carried with visible strain. It showed itself in her vigilance, in her attention to detail, and in her refusal to appear uncertain. Jezebel knew that hesitation invited challenge. Confidence, even when practiced, kept authority intact. This understanding shaped her inner world as much as her outward actions. She also understood solitude. Despite the constant presence of others, leadership created distance. Few spoke to her as an equal. Fewer still knew her private thoughts. This isolation was not entirely unwelcome. It allowed her to think clearly, to plan without interruption, and to maintain the image of strength expected of a queen. As days continued, Jezebel remained steady in her role. The influence she wielded did not fade with time. It settled more deeply into the life of the kingdom, becoming part of its structure. Though the world beyond the palace shifted in subtle ways, within her, resolve remained firm, shaped by the quiet but enduring weight of power she had long accepted as her own. Beyond the ordered life of the palace, a different kind of voice began to be heard, not loudly and not often, yet with a persistence that could not be entirely ignored. It did not enter the halls with ceremony or announce itself before the throne. Instead, it arrived as whispers carried by messengers, fragments of reports spoken quietly by officials, and distant accounts from the edges of the kingdom. This voice belonged to the prophet Elijah. Elijah did not live among the comforts of royal life. He appeared and disappeared according to the will of the Lord, moving through the land with a message that did not bend to power. His words were simple and firm, spoken not for favor but for truth. He spoke of the God of Israel with certainty, calling the people back to the covenant they had forgotten. Though he rarely stood before Jezebel directly, his presence was felt even within the palace walls. At first, his name surfaced only occasionally. A servant might repeat something heard in the marketplace. An official might mention unrest among the people. A report would arrive describing drought, hardship, or strange events that followed Elijah's words. These accounts were not delivered with urgency, yet they carried an undertone of meaning that lingered after they were spoken. Jezebel listened without visible reaction. She was accustomed to opposition, and prophets were not new to Israel. Still, there was something about Elijah that did not fade with time. His warnings were not dramatic appeals meant to stir emotion. They were calm declarations, spoken as statements of what would be, not threats designed to provoke fear. The words attributed to him carried a sense of inevitability. He spoke of judgment not as a distant possibility, but as something already set in motion. Rain would be withheld. Consequences would follow disobedience. These messages spread slowly, carried from village to village, from field to city, until they reached even the guarded spaces of the palace. In her private moments, Jezebel considered these reports. She did not dwell on them with anxiety, yet she did not dismiss them entirely. She had seen enough of the world to know that some forces did not yield to authority. Elijah's God was not like the God she had known in her homeland, bound to temples or rituals controlled by priests. This God acted according to his own will, unmoved by position or title. The calm certainty of Elijah's message stood in contrast to the structured order of the palace. Jezebel's world was built on decisions, alliances, and visible power. Elijah spoke of obedience, covenant, and judgment from a higher authority. These ideas did not clash loudly within her thoughts, but they existed side by side, unresolved. As time passed, Elijah's presence became more defined. Stories circulated of his confrontations with the prophets of Baal, of moments when the power he spoke of was displayed openly before the people. Though Jezebel was not present at these events, their impact reached her. They unsettled the balance she worked to maintain, not through force, but through belief. Still, Jezebel did not respond with haste. She understood patience. Destiny, she believed, was shaped by strength and resolve. Yet Elijah spoke as one who believed destiny was already written, guided by a will greater than any throne. This quiet contrast deepened the weight of his words. The palace remained calm. Daily routines continued. Authority was upheld. But beneath the surface, the whispers of prophecy lingered, carrying with them a sense of approaching reckoning that did not rush, did not shout, and did not need permission to unfold. When evening settled over the palace, the outer courts grew quieter. Voices softened, footsteps became fewer, and the day's business slowly withdrew into stillness. Within her private chambers, Jezebel found herself alone. The space was calm and ordered, removed from the watchful eyes of the court. Here, the weight of the day could be set down, if only for a while. A single lamp was lit, its flame steady and warm. Candlelight rested gently against the stone walls, drawing soft shadows across the room. Rich fabrics lay folded nearby, silk and fine cloth arranged with care. The quiet allowed her thoughts to surface without interruption. In these moments, she did not perform the role of queen for others. She simply remained with herself. Jezebel seated herself near the light, her movements unhurried. The world beyond the chamber felt distant, muted by thick walls and heavy doors. Reports, warnings, and whispered prophecies no longer arrived at her ears. Instead, memory and reflection took their place. She considered the path that had brought her here, the choices made with confidence and conviction, the authority she had embraced without hesitation. Her thoughts did not race. They moved slowly, one after another, like the measured pace of palace life itself. She reflected on power, on belief, and on the voices that now lingered at the edges of her awareness. Elijah's name surfaced again, not as a threat, but as a presence that could not be easily set aside. His words carried a quiet weight that followed her into silence. She reached for the familiar tools of her evening preparation. This ritual was both practical and calming, a return to something known and controlled. Fine cloth brushed against her hands as she adjusted her garments. The soft texture of silk caught the candlelight, reflecting a gentle glow. Each movement was deliberate, grounding her in the present moment. Then came the careful preparation of her eyes. She leaned toward the light, steady and composed. The application was slow, almost meditative. This was not done for display, but for herself. The painted lines framed her gaze, restoring the image she recognized. In this quiet act, she reaffirmed her identity as queen, as one who faced the world with strength and resolve. As she worked, her thoughts continued without urgency. She did not question every decision she had made, nor did she dwell on regret. Instead, she acknowledged the road she had chosen. It was a path shaped by loyalty to her beliefs and confidence in her authority. Whether others approved or opposed her mattered less in this private space. The candle flickered gently, its light rising and falling like a calm breath. Shadows shifted across the walls, but nothing disturbed the stillness. Jezebel completed her preparation and sat quietly, her reflections steady and composed. In the silence of her chamber, she remained surrounded by comfort and familiarity, even as the wider world waited beyond the palace walls. Outside the private stillness of her chamber, the rhythm of the palace began to shift in ways that were quiet yet noticeable. Nothing dramatic announced itself. There were no sudden alarms or hurried commands. Instead, change arrived gently, like a subtle alteration in the air before a storm that had not yet broken. Those who lived within the palace sensed it without fully naming it. Messages began to arrive with slightly greater frequency. They were delivered respectfully, their tone measured, yet they carried news that hinted at movement beyond the usual order. Reports spoke of unrest in distant places, of loyalty changing hands, of murmurs among commanders and elders. These words did not disrupt the calm of the palace, but they lingered after being spoken, settling into the spaces between routine and reflection. The guards at the gates remained steady, yet their vigilance sharpened. Watchful eyes scanned the horizon with greater care. Courtyards that once echoed with easy conversation grew quieter as servants moved with subdued purpose. The palace continued to function smoothly, but its calm felt more deliberate, as if held in place by shared awareness. Jezebel sensed these shifts without being told. Years of leadership had taught her to notice what others overlooked. The subtle changes in posture, the slight pauses before speech, and the careful choice of words all revealed more than formal reports ever could. She did not respond with haste or visible concern. Instead, she absorbed these signs with composed attention. Even the evenings felt different. As lamps were lit and shadows stretched across the floors, there was a sense of waiting woven into the stillness. The quiet did not feel empty, but expectant. It carried the weight of something nearing, not yet seen, but steadily approaching. From her place within the palace, Jezebel remained composed. She understood that change often arrived without spectacle. It did not announce itself loudly, but revealed itself through small, persistent signs. The kingdom she had helped shape was no longer as still as it once had been. Movement stirred at its edges, pressing inward with patient resolve. Yet within the palace walls, calm endured. Meals were served, duties fulfilled, and order maintained. The anticipation did not disturb the surface of daily life. It simply rested beneath it, like a quiet current flowing beneath still water. And so the palace stood, poised between what had been and what was drawing near, waiting without fear, held in a steady and watchful calm. The quiet anticipation that settled over the palace found its way once more into Jezebel's private chambers. As the day drew toward evening, she returned to the familiar stillness of her room, a space untouched by the shifting moods beyond the walls. The door closed softly behind her, and the outside world faded into a distant hush. A lamp was lit, its glow steady and warm. The light gathered gently around the room, settling upon fine fabrics and polished surfaces. Jezebel moved with unhurried grace, aware of each motion, each breath. There was comfort in repetition, in the rituals that had shaped her days for so long. They offered steadiness when the world felt less certain. She seated herself near the light, arranging her garments with care. Silk whispered softly as it shifted beneath her hands. The texture was familiar, reassuring. These preparations were not for display alone, but for herself. They marked a moment of pause, a return to order and intention. With steady hands, she reached for the tools she had used many times before. The act of painting her eyes was deliberate and calm. Each movement followed the last with quiet precision. There was no urgency in the gesture, no tremor of uncertainty. It was a ritual shaped by years of practice, one that allowed her thoughts to settle as her hands worked. As she leaned toward the light, her reflection met her gaze. The painted lines framed her eyes, defining them with strength and clarity. In this moment, she saw not only the queen she was, but the life she had lived. Her thoughts moved gently through memory, touching on choices made with conviction, paths taken without hesitation, and authority held with resolve. She did not dwell on regret. Instead, she acknowledged the firmness of her decisions and the beliefs that had guided her. This quiet reflection did not seek to change the past, but to recognize it. The calm repetition of her movements mirrored the steadiness she had carried throughout her life. The lamp flickered softly, its flame rising and falling like a slow breath. Shadows shifted across the walls, but nothing disturbed the stillness. When the ritual was complete, Jezebel remained seated for a moment, composed and silent. Her reflection was calm, her posture assured. In this private space, surrounded by familiar comforts, she prepared herself inwardly, grounded in the identity she had long embraced. The stillness within the palace was gently disturbed by sounds that carried a different weight than those of daily routine. Footsteps echoed along distant corridors, measured and purposeful. Voices were low, restrained, and formal. The atmosphere shifted without urgency, as though the palace itself sensed the arrival of something long anticipated. Word travelled quietly through the halls that Jehu had come. He was no longer simply a commander or messenger, but a man anointed king by the prophet sent from the Lord. His approach did not arrive with chaos or shouting. Instead, it unfolded with order and intention, carried forward by soldiers who moved with discipline and resolve. Within her chamber, Jezebel became aware of the change. The sounds reached her ears faintly, filtered through stone and distance. She did not rush or rise in alarm. Her posture remained composed, her presence steady. She had known this moment was drawing near, felt it in the subtle movements of the palace and the quiet warnings carried by rumor and report. Outside, the gates of Jezreel opened. Jehu entered the city not as a visitor seeking permission, but as one acting under divine command. His soldiers followed him, their armor catching the light as they passed beneath archways and into courtyards. Their steps were firm, yet unhurried, as though guided by a purpose already decided. The palace did not resist their entry. Guards did not raise alarms. The stillness held, deep and watchful. Servants withdrew to the edges of rooms, sensing that events were unfolding beyond their place to intervene. The air felt dense with meaning, yet calm, like the pause before a final word is spoken. Jezebel remained where she was. She rose slowly and moved toward the window that overlooked the approach. From this height, she could see movement below, the quiet coordination of men who answered to a new authority. Her painted eyes were steady, her gaze direct. There was no confusion in her expression, no frantic motion. She faced what was coming with the same composed resolve she had carried throughout her life. As Jehu drew nearer, the palace walls seemed to narrow the space between them. His arrival was not announced with ceremony, yet it carried undeniable weight. He came as the fulfillment of prophecy spoken long before, a living instrument of the judgment declared against the house of Ahab. This truth lingered in the air, unspoken yet present. The sound of voices rose slightly as Jehu called out. His words were firm, addressed to those within the palace. He did not speak to Jezebel at once, but his presence alone was enough to bring the moment into focus. Those who heard him understood that the order of the kingdom had shifted. From her place above, Jezebel looked down. She did not hide or turn away. The years of authority, influence, and preparation led her to this point. Her bearing remained regal, her posture upright. She spoke then, her voice carrying across the distance, addressing Jehu directly. Her words recalled the past, invoking memory and meaning, spoken without fear or pleading. The exchange was brief, yet heavy with significance. Jehu listened, his expression unchanged. The moment was suspended between them, filled with history, prophecy, and consequence. Soldiers stood nearby, silent and attentive, awaiting instruction. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Nothing moved quickly. There was no rush, no clash of sound or motion. The confrontation unfolded within stillness, intense yet controlled. The calm did not lessen the gravity of the moment. Instead, it deepened it, allowing the weight of what was unfolding to settle fully into place. From her place above the courtyard, Jezebel remained still. The voices below quieted, and the moment stretched gently, allowing her thoughts to turn inward. She did not search for escape, nor did she give herself to sudden fear. Instead, her mind settled into reflection, calm and clear, as though she had been preparing for this moment long before it arrived. She considered the long path of her life, beginning in the palace of her father in Sidon, where she first learned what it meant to rule. She remembered the early lessons of authority, the understanding that power was not merely held, but exercised through intention and resolve. Those lessons had shaped her deeply, guiding every choice she made as queen in a land not her own. Her thoughts moved through the years she had spent beside Ahab, watching the kingdom rise and strain beneath competing loyalties. She recalled moments of confidence, times when her influence felt unshakable, when the palace stood firm and the throne secure. These memories did not bring regret. They felt complete, part of a life lived with certainty rather than hesitation. She thought of the prophets she had opposed, and of Elijah whose words had carried a weight unlike any other. His warnings had never sounded frantic or uncertain. They had been calm declarations, spoken as truth rather than argument. Now, standing where she was, Jezebel understood that those words had been moving toward fulfillment all along. Her gaze remained steady as she accepted what this moment represented. There was no bargaining within her thoughts, no sudden wish to alter the course she had chosen. She had lived according to her convictions, defending what she believed to be right and necessary. Whether others judged her harshly or remembered her with fear did not trouble her now. She was aware of her surroundings, the stone beneath her feet, the open air around her, and the eyes turned upward toward her. Yet these details felt distant, secondary to the quiet clarity forming within her. The end that approached was not a surprise. It felt like the closing of a chapter long written. Jezebel's emotions did not rise in waves or break into turmoil. They remained measured, composed, held within the same discipline that had guided her throughout her reign. There was sorrow, perhaps, for what might have been different, but it did not overwhelm her. There was pride in her bearing, not rooted in vanity, but in consistency. She had been who she was, without apology. She accepted that the power she once commanded now rested elsewhere. The kingdom was moving under a different authority, one appointed by the Lord she had never served. This realization did not provoke resistance. It simply settled into place, acknowledged without argument. Her painted eyes remained fixed, reflecting not defiance, but awareness. She understood that history often turned quietly, without ceremony, and that lives of great influence could end without spectacle. The meaning of a life, she knew, was not measured by how it concluded, but by how it had been lived. In this stillness, Jezebel stood as herself, a queen shaped by choice, conviction, and consequence. The moment did not demand words from her. Her silence carried all that needed to be said. The palace seemed to breathe in the soft twilight, its halls long and echoing, filled with the faint sounds of footsteps and muted voices. The light from the setting sun shifted through the tall windows, casting golden streaks that moved slowly across polished floors and the carved surfaces of doors and railings. Every corner, every archway, held a quiet weight, as if the walls themselves sensed the closing of an era. Within those halls, the approach of the king's men was felt more than heard. Soft, measured movements carried through corridors and along staircases. The clinking of armor and the subdued murmur of commands became part of the palace's rhythm, blending with the distant hum of everyday life that had not yet fully realized it was changing. Shadows deepened, and the warm glow of lamps and torches reflected faintly on stone and wood, creating a tapestry of light and dark that seemed to move with its own gentle intention. Jezebel's chambers were reached at last, the quiet, determined steps drawing near. The doors were approached not with haste, but with certainty, and the echoes that accompanied them carried a subtle resonance throughout the rooms beyond. The palace, which had once felt vast and unshakable, now felt intimate and enclosed, every echo a reminder of the shifting power within its walls. From the windows, light continued to change, softening and fading into evening. Sunlight touched the edges of tapestries and furniture before retreating, leaving behind a muted glow that bathed the stone surfaces. The air was still, scented faintly with a mixture of oils, wax, and worn wood that had settled over years of careful attention. Each breath seemed deeper, more measured, as if the palace itself had slowed to observe what was unfolding. Within the rooms, objects remained in their places, untouched, yet they seemed more deliberate now, more significant. Bowls, cups, and vessels caught the subtle light, glinting briefly before sinking back into shadow. The soft flutter of fabric, a shift of silk across the floor, and the quiet rustle of pages or curtains became amplified, drawing attention to details often overlooked. These ordinary sounds marked the rhythm of the end, delicate but unyielding. The corridors stretched like rivers of stone and light, long and echoing, carrying with them the quiet movements of soldiers and attendants. Each echo seemed to linger longer than before, touching walls and pillars and returning in faint reverberations that made every step feel consequential. Doors opened slowly and closed without fanfare, the soft sounds adding to the measured pace of the unfolding moment. Even the shadows seemed to hold a presence, shifting gradually as lanterns swayed with the passage of figures. The interplay of light and dark gave the halls a living quality, as though the palace itself was aware of the change and participated in it with a hushed dignity. The soft gleam of metal and polished surfaces caught the eye in passing, a reminder of both the beauty and the stillness that defined this place. The quiet of the rooms deepened as attendants and soldiers moved through them, leaving traces in the way fabric brushed against stone or the faintest echo of a step lingered along the corridor. Every sound was gentle, restrained, as though the palace itself guided the pace, preserving a sense of order even as the structure of authority shifted. Outside the windows, the sky deepened from amber to muted indigo, the fading light brushing against the city beyond. The world outside the palace moved slowly, unaware of the quiet transformations within, while inside, every hall, chamber, and corridor held the delicate weight of inevitability. The echoes and shadows combined with the fading warmth of light to create a sense of soft finality that was felt rather than announced. Within this serene but weighted atmosphere, the palace seemed to fold inward on itself, carrying each sound, shadow, and movement into the stillness. The familiar rhythms of daily life had given way to a gentle, persistent unfolding, each detail rendered with clarity and calm. The moment carried both beauty and gravity, the soft light and echoing halls marking the passage of time and the quiet closing of the chapter. Within the quiet that filled the palace, the echo of footsteps and the shifting light seemed to invite contemplation. The walls, once lined with tapestries and gilded decorations, now appeared to hold the memory of every act, every choice made within their embrace. In this stillness, one could sense the delicate passage of time, the gentle reminder that all earthly matters, wealth, beauty, authority, were fleeting, no matter how enduring they had once seemed. The painted eyes of a queen, the jewels that caught the glow of candlelight, the carefully arranged garments and polished halls, all these were symbols of power and influence, yet they were fragile in the presence of inevitable change. Even the grandest palace, with its echoing corridors and sunlight streaming through high windows, could not shield what was temporary from its conclusion. There was a quiet lesson embedded in the soft shadows that stretched across stone and silk. Beauty and authority may captivate the senses, yet they are as fleeting as the light that dances and fades along the floors. In these moments of reflection, one could consider how human effort, no matter how deliberate, eventually passes into memory. The labor of arranging a chamber, the meticulous care of appearance, the careful management of servants and advisers, all were meaningful, yet they existed within a world far larger than any single life. There was a certain peace in understanding this, a gentle acknowledgment that the structures and appearances built with care would not last forever. Even the most commanding presence, the most elegant appearance, could not prevent the turning of time. Authority itself shifted silently, sometimes imperceptibly, moving from one hand to another without fanfare. In this soft, observing light, it became clear that the trappings of power were transient, and yet they held their significance while present, offering moments of purpose and order in a world that would not pause. The quiet contemplation extended to human desires and ambitions. The things we chase, the images we cultivate, and the influence we wield, these occupy our minds and shape our days, but they are delicate threads within a vast tapestry. One could feel a gentle stillness in recognizing that life's concerns, though pressing, are only a part of a larger rhythm that moves quietly and unceasingly, beyond control and beyond pause. Even the painted eyes, once a symbol of vigilance and self-assurance, now seemed to carry an additional meaning. They reflected not only the individual who wore them, but the ephemeral nature of appearance itself. The colors, lines, and care invested in beauty faded with time, yet they left an impression, a memory of attention and intention, like footprints along a quiet path. As the palace remained bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and candlelight, the lesson extended further. The pursuit of power and recognition may shape the world in its moment, yet it is the quieter, reflective understanding of life's impermanence that endures most deeply. In the hush of echoing halls, one could sense that each act of vanity and ambition eventually yields to time, leaving only the impression of meaning and the stillness of what remains after movement ceases. There was no need for words or grand declarations. The quiet of the palace, the shadows on the walls, and the fading warmth of light carried the lesson gently, like a soft wind passing through the chambers. It spoke of humility, of reflection, and of the calm recognition that beauty, influence, and earthly concerns are both meaningful and ephemeral, each holding their place in the flow of time until the moment of stillness that inevitably arrives. In this way, power and vanity were not condemned, but observed, appreciated, and understood for their delicate place within a larger, enduring rhythm. The soft flicker of candlelight, the echo of steps long past, and the serene hush of the palace invited contemplation, a quiet meditation on the fleeting nature of all that humans seek to hold, even as life moves gently onward. In the stillness of the palace, one could consider the life of Jezebel not as a tale of judgment, but as a quiet reflection on the ways human choices shape experience. Every decision, every act of influence, and every deliberate moment carried with it ripples that extended beyond the immediate, touching the lives of many and leaving impressions that endured long after the day had passed. Her story invites a gentle awareness of the connection between actions and their consequences, not with urgency, but with calm observation. The life she led demonstrates the weight of choice, both large and small. From the careful guidance of the palace, to the alliances she nurtured, to the rituals she performed in solitude, each moment was a decision made with intention. These choices, however, did not exist in isolation. They intertwined with the currents of history, faith, and circumstance, showing how even the most deliberate acts are part of a larger tapestry beyond one individual's control. In the quiet reflection of her chambers, one could imagine the soft unfolding of these ripples, gentle but persistent, shaping the world around her with subtle inevitability. Her story also carries a message about consequences. Not all outcomes were immediate, and not all were visible. Some unfolded slowly, like shadows stretching across palace floors as evening light softened. Others emerged through the movement of people, the shifting loyalty of those around her, or the fulfillment of words spoken by prophets far away. In considering these moments, the mind may rest on the understanding that actions, whether grand or private, are followed by results, sometimes distant, sometimes quiet, and often beyond anticipation. The palace, echoing with soft sounds and shifting light, mirrors this natural rhythm, the measured passage from cause to effect, from action to understanding. Within this reflection, there is also space for contemplating the importance of inner peace. Jezebel, in her private chambers, spent long hours in rituals that brought her steadiness, from arranging garments to painting her eyes with care. These practices, gentle and deliberate, were not only outward expressions but inward anchors. They remind the mind that serenity is cultivated not by controlling every outcome, but by maintaining presence and composure, even when life's currents move unpredictably. Inner peace is a quiet companion, guiding thought and action with calm clarity, allowing one to meet each moment fully, without agitation. Her story further suggests that the lessons of life are often subtle. They are found not only in dramatic events or grand displays of power, but in the small, persistent details, the measured steps through echoing halls, the reflection in a candlelit mirror, the awareness of shifting shadows and fading light. These are the rhythms that teach patience, attentiveness, and understanding. They invite contemplation of how life, in its intricate patterns, carries meaning in ways that are gentle and ongoing rather than abrupt or forceful. The narrative of Jezebel also encourages consideration of balance. Influence and authority are parts of human experience, but they are balanced by reflection, solitude, and acknowledgement of forces beyond one's control. Her story does not simply dwell on triumph or failure, but on the full range of experience that comes with living intentionally. Even when events move beyond personal command, the mind can remain centered, observing and understanding with quiet awareness. In the softness of candlelight and the hush of the palace, her life unfolds as a space for meditation. Listeners can consider their own choices and consequences, the ways personal actions touch others, and the delicate necessity of inner steadiness amidst change. Jezebel's story, when approached with calm reflection, offers insight into the human condition. That life is shaped by decisions, guided by unseen forces, and measured not solely by outcomes, but by the presence and awareness cultivated along the way. Through this lens, the tale becomes less about condemnation and more about understanding. It invites gentle contemplation, a resting of the mind on universal truths, and a recognition that every life, with its decisions, triumphs, and quiet moments of solitude, carries lessons that extend beyond its own boundaries. In this stillness, one may find both resonance and repose, feeling the slow, unhurried movement of history and human experience as it passes softly into memory and reflection. The palace now rested under the gentle sweep of evening. Light faded softly from the high windows, leaving behind a serene glow that lingered on stone and wood. Shadows moved quietly, stretching across walls and floors as if in slow conversation with the stillness of the night. Every corner seemed to exhale a calm, carrying the memory of the day and the quiet rhythm of its passing. In this calm, one could imagine the air itself holding a lullaby, a soft song whispered by walls and corridors, by the flicker of lanterns and the gentle sway of curtains. The palace, once a place of authority and movement, now seemed to pause entirely, drawing in the day's energy and letting it settle into peaceful quiet. Sounds, once measured with purpose, softened into gentle echoes, like distant wind through open windows or the faint brush of fabric across polished floors. There was a sense of safety woven through the space, a quiet invitation to release attention from what had been urgent and pressing. The rooms, lined with familiar textures and warm light, offered a sanctuary from the bustle of the wider world. One could imagine sitting or lying within this calm, feeling the weight of the day ease, and noticing the subtle movement of breath and heartbeat as companions to the quiet night. The soft flicker of candlelight continued to move across surfaces, painting the walls with gentle color. Shadows shifted imperceptibly, but nothing stirred with urgency. The rhythm of life here was measured, slow, and predictable, offering a comforting reminder that not everything required immediate attention. Even the smallest detail, the reflection of light on polished stone, the faint scent of oils and wood, the rustle of silk, became a part of the serene environment, contributing to a sense of gentle containment and ease. In this atmosphere, thoughts could drift, free from expectation. The lessons of the day, the reflections on choice, consequence, and inner steadiness, could rest quietly in the mind without pressure. Each idea settled softly, like petals floating to the floor, each one landing with care and leaving a gentle impression. The mind could observe without holding too tightly, allowing understanding to arrive naturally and calmly. The air itself seemed to carry a gentle rhythm, a slow pulse that mirrored the movement of life within the palace and the natural order beyond its walls. One could imagine the soft stir of leaves in a distant garden, the faint trickle of water in a hidden fountain, and the quiet hum of life continuing, steady and unobtrusive. In this space there was no rush, no need for action, only the soft unfolding of presence and awareness. Eyes might close, following the gentle patterns of light and shadow in the mind's eye. Thoughts could become like slow rivers, moving with ease and calm, carrying the quiet understanding that life is a balance of motion and rest, of attention and release. There was permission here to let tension dissolve, to allow the body and mind to settle into the gentle embrace of the night. The palace itself, imagined in this moment, became a cocoon of quiet reflection. Each stone, each beam of light, and each whispering shadow contributed to a sense of deep safety. The past, with its choices and reflections, and the future, with its inevitability, both seemed distant, held lightly, leaving only the present calm to fill the space. In this serene environment, the mind could wander to soft imaginings, a gentle breeze across a courtyard, the hush of a chamber waiting patiently for the day's end, the slow sway of candlelight casting familiar patterns across walls. These images, gentle and flowing, offered a sense of continuity, a thread to follow into stillness. All around, the world appeared to breathe softly. Each sound, movement, and shadow was part of a quiet rhythm that welcomed rest. In this space, one could feel the body soften, muscles releasing their hold on tension, and the mind surrendering to calm, like a river settling into still pools. The steady pulse of life, present yet unobtrusive, reminded every listener that safety and peace were available, quietly surrounding them. And so, the story of the palace, of the queen, and of the subtle movements of power and reflection drifted gently into the hush of the evening. The mind could follow the soft patterns of light and sound, carrying understanding and calm into a quiet, receptive space. With each gentle breath, the feeling of rest deepened, enveloping the senses, letting the story become a calm current that fades naturally, leaving only serenity and the gentle promise of sleep. Let your mind settle into this calm, allowing every thought to drift gently like leaves on a quiet stream. Rest here fully, feeling safe, peaceful, and ready to drift into a gentle, restorative sleep.